do support it. The counties have the ability to do it by majority. The cities and villages have the ability to do it by majority, and there's no reason why the township should not also have the ability to do it by majority. So yes, I do support it.
It's interesting you say that because Representative Bill Sykes used the phrase tip to me, and so did Lieutenant Hart.
Well, look it up.
And
Jim.
Steve Wilson.
Look it up in the bill.
I'm just telling you.
I'm sure they probably spoke to
Every
you about that.
senator in the state of Ohio.
I'm sure they probably had a conversation with you about TIF. The fact of the matter is, what Mr. James just said about HB 166 is 100% false. He just read it. Read it again. What does it say about TIF there? It says absolutely nothing about TIF.
You are correct, it says nothing about TIF. 1 second ago was the first mention of the word TIF out of my mouth today, Mr. Weedman. Whatever you heard, I did not say that. I'll be happy to hand you my transcript here. I referred to section 505.262, which has to do with construction and bond issues. I have not mentioned TIFs. You are correct. Last month, when I had not been privy to the wording of the change, as you confirmed you had, I did think it was TIFs. I have not mentioned TIFs today, and I read from the amendment to HB 166, which passed the
And
House.
what's the issue with that?
The issue with that is it changes the vote from unanimous to, if the trustees make an election to change to majority, to a majority vote going forward for township trustees to issue bonds and securities and pay for construction in the township or subsidize construction. That has nothing to do with walling things off in tax increment financing districts. It may occur in conjunction with it, I agree. However, I did not mention TIFs. Welcome to go listen to the audio that's being made here. We make sure the microphone works. So,
But it's an interesting point that you bring up because it is squeezed in nefariously in a 3,500-page document that at least five representatives have said to me that they voted for it, the budget bill. They had no idea this was it.
It's not in.
The provision of this, whatever the number is, 52, whatever it is, yes. They didn't see it. It was hidden in there.
You said tax increment, you said TIF.
You're the
He
first
said,
one
he
to
did
say
not
it
say,
here
he
today.
did not say TIF. You
It-
said
it-
TIF. And all I'm saying, it's not in there.
Well, and whatever, what
You're
we're
correct.
talking
Okay,
about is the
that's fine.
50, what's the number?
That's fine.
Well, House Bill 166, and then it's number, what have you found, 5209 or something.
it's, the change is to Ohio Revised Code, section 505.262.
That is what I'm talking about,
Okay.
the House of Representatives and to,
But,
as well as Senate.
I thought you were referring to TIF.
no, I hadn't mentioned the word.
And I guarantee that I have no idea how it got there. But I'm not a legislator. If you want to talk to the legislators, feel free to. I'm not a legislator. I don't vote on it.
No, I.
But you lobbied to get it changed.
I did not lobby to get that changed.
Well, then you've got some people who really misunderstood you. Bill
I
Sykes
didn't
among
even,
them.
I did not
Bill
even,
Sykes among
I
them.
did not even know that was in the bill. I had nothing to do with that, that's in the bill. There's, what he just read, I have no idea, I did not know was in the bill until after it was reported in the Cincinnati Enquirer. So I don't know what you're talking about.
That leads to another question from me then. What was the legislation you were referring to last month that you were familiar with?
I was referring to the tax increment financing, which I thought was in the bill. It's not in the bill.
Okay. Well, back to my question, because you responded, thank you, but Mr. Connor, I'm not sure you answered my question. My question wasn't, was the legislature wise in making this option available to townships that allows townships to elect going forward to move from unanimous vote to majority, but the township then will be faced with the option of doing that. Do you think it's a good idea for Sycamore Township to vote to move to a majority vote for financing projects like that? Do you have a view?
Well, Sycamore Township wouldn't be voting to change it. It would be changed at the Ohio legislature, and then we would abide by what the Ohio legislature puts into place. Having said that, it is my opinion that I don't think that townships should be handicapped in their voting procedure. As Mr. Weedman said, counties can pass these things with majority votes, cities can pass them with majority votes, villages can pass them with majority votes, townships cannot. I don't feel that we're on a level playing field with the other jurisdictions. So for that reason, yeah, I think we should have the same authority to make decisions by majority vote that all of the other jurisdictions do.
Well, that's very interesting because there are 1,308 townships in the state of Ohio. However, this only affects those urban rural 26, 27, 28, 26, I'd say there's 1,200 and some that are not affected by this.
I would
And
I would
what-
urge them to lobby for the
Yeah.
same treatment.
One of the reasons is those 1,200 and change townships in the state of Ohio don't do this.
No, that's not right. I've checked with Ohio State and as a matter of fact, if the opportunity arises, they can in fact do it.
If you have
If you can.
opposition to that, you should talk to the people who are voting on it,
Believe me,
not
I
us.
am.
Yeah,
Believe
that's
me, I
great.
am, as you know, from the
That's
front
great.
page of the Enquirer,
That's
and the
great.
front page of the community paper this week.
That's great.
So yes,
I'm
yes,
happy-
I
I'm
am
happy.
opposed to it.
That's great.
And I'm opposed to the way it was handled.
It was done, I think, as Tom Brinkman suggested, it was done transparently.
Oh, yeah, transparently?
Yeah, because the House bill gets sent to the Senate. The House bill is a public document. If you wanna go read it, go read it. But did you expect to put it on a report to you
3,500
first?
pages. 3,500
Exactly.
pages, and you slip it through there.
I didn't slip anything.
I'm saying, you slip it through it, meaning you, meaning,
All right, we've had enough.
All right, I have another.
I'm taking, we're gonna get the order back in this room. We've had enough of this subject. That's
So,
good.
different
You know where, you know where we are. Go ahead, keep
I
going.
definitely do. All right, thank you. No mention of TIFs going forward here either, I promise. I wanted to talk about the festival coming up in about 5 weeks here, the 2019 festival in Sycamore. I see from documents the township provided today that so far there are $22,400 in donations that have been received so far. That's good. That's on par with prior years at least. But Mr. McEwen's not here tonight. Mr. McEwen wasn't at Tuesday's workshop to report about planning and progress toward the festival either, or about budgeting or the sponsorship process. Perhaps Mr. Kellums has a report that we'll hear later that Mr. McEwen's provided him, perhaps not, I don't know. But the Parks Committee meeting that was publicly announced and scheduled for June 10th has also been canceled now, I see, from tonight's agenda. So that's not going forward. Looking back at past festivals, and I've spoken to you gentlemen before about that, the township has poured over $1.6 million into festivals over the last 15 years. And it's only recouped about $500,000 of that through sponsorships and revenues. So in an accounting ledger, that's $1.1 million roughly in red ink, give or take a few 10,000s or so in there. 4 years ago, two of the trustees, Mr. Connor and former trustee Cliff Bishop, set up a festival committee to oversee the 2015 and later township festivals. Mr. Weedman didn't vote on that resolution. It was number 2015-18, and the minutes from that meeting reflect he was excused. I assume he was out of town or ill or something. But I assume the trustees at the time didn't create that committee just as an idle gesture, but rather the purpose in forming it was to promote better planning and to get a better handle on the spiraling cost to township taxpayers of the annual festival. That would have made sense in early 2015 when it was approved, given that the 2014 festival took in $10,000 less than the year before and cost $20,000 more than the year before. So in Resolution 2015-18, which was passed on February 19th of 2015, the trustees designated the Festival Committee to be independent of the Parks Committee and set it up to have 3 members who would serve 3-year terms. The Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. McEwen, was designated as the, quote, staff responsible to the committee, and also as the liaison between it and the township administrator. The trustees required that the committee, quote, shall establish rules for its operation and governance, shall keep a record of its proceedings, and shall establish a method for notifying the public or interested parties of the time and place of meetings of the committee. All meetings shall be subject to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22, Ohio's Open Meetings or Sunshine Law, and all written records of the committee shall be subject to Ohio Revised Code Section 149.43, Ohio's Public Records Law. That's in the resolution creating it. The trustees gave the committee several duties in that resolution, including setting a budget for each festival, planning its execution, selecting vendors, even setting menus and so forth. And how did all that turn out? Well, the 4 festivals that followed creation of the festival committee, at least on paper by resolution, bled almost $485,000 in red ink. Combined, they took in about $125,000 in donations and revenues, but the township spent almost $610,000 on those events. Technically, that wasn't the festival committee's fault, though, because until this year, it didn't actually have any members anyway. The trustees finally appointed members to the committee exactly 4 years to the day after it was created on February 19th of this year, 2019. Who did the trustees appoint? Sitting members of the Parks Board, who'd been running the festival for years as members of that separate public body. But in the 4+ years since the creation on paper of the Festival Committee as a township public body, it has never officially met, at least not in a legally compliant manner. Unofficially, the Festival Committee apparently met for the first time in conjunction with the Parks and Recreation Committee on May 13th, just a month ago, less than a month ago, which isn't surprising given that the members of the two bodies overlap, of course. But if that was a meeting of the Festival Committee, it seems to have met in violation of Ohio law. The Parks Committee meeting notice for the May 13th meeting didn't indicate that the Festival Committee was already meeting, and there was no separate notice for the Festival Committee meeting. Nonetheless, the Parks minutes show that those present selected festival vendors that day and made some menu plans, which is the purview of the Festival Committee. As a public body, state law requires that the Festival Committee must give notice to the public of its meetings at least 24 hours in advance. And the trustees required in the resolution establishing the committee that it was supposed to, quote, establish a method for notifying the public or interested parties of the time, place, and meetings of the committee. Despite that, records the township provided to me this week show that no such notice has ever been given to the public, and that it has never established a method for doing so. Those records also show that the Festival Committee never established the required rules for its governance, and that it has never set a budget for the festival that is now 5 weeks out. No members for 4 years, no public meeting notice method, no public notice of meetings, Open Meetings Act violations, no rules for committee governance, and no festival budget, at least from the committee tasked with developing it. Putting myself in your shoes as trustees, I think I'd be pretty upset if I were sitting up there, upset at the staff and upset at myself. Because if I were a trustee, I'd be very unhappy to learn that a plan I voted to put in place, which contained specific directives, was being treated as an empty gesture and was being ignored by those who were supposed to implement it. If I were a trustee, I'd do whatever I could to ensure that the festival doesn't result in net losses exceeding $130,000 to $150,000 year after year. That's wasteful and extravagant. I'd hire cheaper entertainment, perhaps local, for example. If I were a trustee, I'd also try to look back periodically to ensure that committee structures I'd voted to put in place were actually put in place. If I were sitting in your shoes as trustee, I'd be very concerned that the failure of a township committee to give public notice before holding the meeting could expose the township to costly lawsuits over possible Open Meetings Act violations. Just in the last month, Colerain Township was sued over alleged Open Meeting Act violations concerning its land use committee, which apparently meets but doesn't keep minutes and doesn't necessarily notify anyone it's meeting. And there were other meeting violations alleged there as well in the complaint. Milford just paid out a lot of money to conclude a similar suit, and the serial texters in the city of Cincinnati have cost their taxpayers quite a bit of money over Open Meeting Act and record violations as well. We certainly don't want to go down that road. Thinking of sitting there in your shoes, frankly, if I were a trustee after I voted to create new township commissions and committees for things such as festival management, or to use a more recent example, for obtaining citizen input on zoning and land use, I'd make sure that people actually got appointed to those things. And as to land use, there's a committee sitting out there waiting to be staffed. So my question from all that is, who is minding the store here? Who is watching out for the residents and taxpayers? Do we even know whether we're looking at another $150,000 net festival loss again? Last year, Mr. Weedman indicated in a trustee meeting when I questioned numbers that the goal was to spend no more than a net $100,000 per year on the festival. Will that happen, and who will bear the consequences if it doesn't? Any input from anyone?
No, other than, these are not losses, these are allocated expenses to a two-day family event where we subsidize the rides for the kids. Unlike our neighbor to the north who spends over $400,000 on one adult event for one night, we spend around $100,000 for 2 nights. It's a family event, and we get a lot of great feedback from our residents that this is a great community event. So from that standpoint, you can call it a loss, that's your prerogative to do so, but it's not a loss. Those are allocated funds to a Parks and Rec event that we do once a year, and they're not losses. Okay, so I'm done with that.
Well, one thing you mentioned that we failed to look at, and I want Mr. Miller, our law director, to look into this and give advice to Mr. Pickford on what's going on. What is going on? We're being in violation of sunshine laws, ORC, the requirements for meetings. Let's look into this and let's get back on track and let's start running things the proper way.
I'll talk to Mr.
Okay,
McEwen.
please, would you do that?
I'll see
We
what,
talked about transparency last year, and
There is, I know the rules were established right after the committee was created 5 years ago. I don't know what document you got. I will talk to Mr. McEwen and see about his notification processes.
I've made 2 public records requests for any rules established by the committee ever in any minutes.
Well, maybe you didn't get the right documents, I don't know, so let me look into it.
I have seen a document with those rules, it does exist, they were created. I think there's probably some confusion on the festival committee's part as to the overlap between notifications and agendas and things like that regarding festival meetings versus parks meetings. I think they may think that mistakenly think that they are one and the same and not realize that they have to be done separately. But they are operating under a set of guidelines that were created
I'll
as a
talk to
result
Mr.
in
McEwen,
the
I'll take a look at
aftermath
how he did it.
of the resolution.
I'll take over notification of that.
Okay, that
Solve
leads
that
to,
problem.
sorry, that leads to the question as to who approved those rules on behalf of the committee, given that it had no members until February 19th of this year. That appears to go back to the confusion about the nature of the committee, I suppose, on behalf
There
of
were
the
members
budget.
appointed those years ago, I can remember, it's just, I have to see what documents you got, I don't know.
Yeah, the
Perhaps I
minutes-
didn't find them all, I don't know.
Minutes don't reflect that from any meetings, and there's no resolution appointing.
Can't answer those questions
Okay.
right now.
Well, my question was really not so much whether it's a loss or an expense, but is the expense going to be more than $100,000 this year? And is there a budget in place? Is there anyone in the room who can answer that question?
Well, there's 100,000, or I have to check, I believe there's 120,000 allocated. Underneath that, it'd be up to Mike to create that budget, but I think his sponsorship, Trace, do you know what his sponsorships are committed to versus paid? I'm not sure. But they establish their cost for all their items, so they'll have that short.
And if I'm not mistaken, the expenses for entertainment are down approximately close to $40,000 compared to the previous year.
I don't know.
it went down considerably, but I don't know how that affected them because we added local acts. So it was down, it is down,
It
it
is
is
down.
down considerably from last year.
Yeah, and I think the local acts are pretty much on a par with last year, so I think the comparison of the national act says that the spending on national entertainment has come down considerably from last year.
I will note I've requested budget information as well and records reflecting that, and according to Ms. Campbell, they don't exist in terms of what was provided. So
I'll
I
look
look
into
forward
it.
to receiving it. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your time. I know that took a little while. I'm gonna need to.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the list?
Standish Ford.
Good evening, everyone. Standish Forden, 12137 Macaulay Road. Mr. LaBarbera, as a descendant of both a World War I and World War II vet, I appreciate your memory of D-Day on behalf of them and their service.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I want to revisit some things as Mr. James has done, but on a lighter note. The speed buggy, as I believe it's been so affectionately referred to, has been brought up for many months, over a year. And I don't know if the township is creating a museum in the parking lot, but it still is rusting away and taking up space in the parking lot out back. Did everybody forget about it?
I'll address it. Tracy has a bunch of equipment going to the scrapyard or being decommissioned, and it's gonna get added to that resolution.
It'll have to be
Tracy's
added
ready
to
for
the
the stuff.
resolution. It's presently not on the resolution.
Yeah, so we'll just modify it. It's getting out of your center.
Can
Unless you
that-
want it.
Can that be done now?
No, it cannot. It needs to be dispersed of as part of the resolution.
Understand that the trustee cannot make a resolution at this meeting?
Can we add that?
They can ask the law director to prepare one.
Yeah, we'll use the trail.
Yeah, I can't
Take this on.
come up with one sitting here, no.
Okay, so a trustee could not. make a-
Resolution should be in writing.
Understand, so could a trustee make a motion
To do what?
as per
We can
Mr.
take
Bickford
forward
suggested, adding it to the scrap heap?
No, it needs to be disposed of by a resolution. They could, pass a motion to ask me to prepare one for next time.
Or can we amend these?
Well, before you do that, chief just decide he wants it.
Yeah, we can use the trailer part of it. We got, big trash pumps that, we use for like storms, for pumping basements and that. It'd
Okay.
be perfect, we put it on there and drive it to her, and
Okay.
sometimes you have to leave it at somebody's house, so it pump out the basement, when you get like 4 feet of water in the basement.
Problem resolved.
Instead of recycling, we're gonna reuse it.
We'll get it tomorrow.
I like that even better.
Reuse it. We don't need the sign, but we need the trailer.
Thank you,
And just
Chief.
throw away the sign, get rid of the sign.
I still have to
Yeah.
dispose of the
Thanks, Steve.
sign, we still, Doug, we probably have to put the sign on the resolution, don't we? The sign portion of that trailer, can we just pitch it, or does that need to go as a,
The sign?
yeah, the sign portion?
The actual-
Chief just wants the trailer,
He wants the trailer part, he doesn't want the.
he doesn't want the sign portion, does that have
What's the
to,
value of it?
$3?
I think if it's less than 1,000, you can just,
Yes.
It's
It's
useless, worthless.
It's garbage.
It won't be worth it.
I mean, I'll check the statute, but there is some level
Once it's disassembled, it wouldn't be worth
that
anything.
you just picture.
Thank you. I know there are residents that come to this building for various meetings, and they would appreciate an additional parking spot. Following up on a similar topic, the speed buggy was used to deter speeders. And at a previous trustee meeting, I came here, and I believe there was some discourse amongst the trustees about purchasing additional speed signs. It's at least 2 months ago. Has anything been done about that?
I thought Tracy,
Yes,
you
it
were,
has, it's been ordered,
And how many have been ordered, please?
one additional of what we have now.
One additional. I believe there was a request for at least 2, in consensus among the trustees.
I think the consensus was that we would order, we have one, we would order another, and if we needed more, we would order more.
yeah, I brought up to 2, and then they said 1, and then we said, okay, we'll see what it works, see how it works.
And, yeah, and we agreed
We agreed.
unanimously
Yeah,
to purchase
we got
one, put it into rotation with the other one, and
And then see what happens.
evaluate, see whether we need any additional.
So the township now has a total of 2 speed signs.
We still only have one, the second one hasn't come in yet.
Will. And is there a waiting, is there a waiting list for the speed signs currently, Mr. Kellum?
I can't answer that, I mean, well, I'm waiting, so I'm assuming there is.
I've been
It's
waiting
been
for 6
ordered.
months. Who would keep that list, please, so I can possibly review?
Oh, you mean, is there a waiting list for it to go from, I thought you meant, was there a waiting list for the manufacturing of it, for us?
No, sir, for residents.
Yes. There is a list, yes.